Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and click over to our presentation. For those of you that may have just joined, this is Jordan Harold. I'm one of the health behaviorists. I'm going to get our video up and going. We're here and we're going to be talking about eating style today. It's not just me here. It's going to be me and some of our counseling interns. So you guys should be able to see me here in a second. So I want to introduce to you first our counseling interns. If I can turn it. Sophie and Elster. You guys are going to be seeing them a little bit in this virtual group sometime. So they're going to be hanging out with us today for a little bit. I'm going to be doing the presentation, but if you see them later, that's who they are. So give them a warm welcome. What I want you guys to do first is go ahead and take a second to grab a sheet of paper and a pen, if you will, because we're going to be jotting some things down today. So if you could go ahead and grab that while we get started. And as you're doing that, I want you to think about, and you don't have to type it in, but go ahead and start thinking a little bit about if you could think of one area that you struggle with primarily. What situation per se or anything like that. I want you to go ahead and write it at the top of your paper. I'm going to give you all a few minutes to be able to do that. And if you'd like to, go ahead and share it in the chat box, but don't feel like you have to. So we can just kind of see if that's something you want to do. What's the most challenging situation you have or barrier to following the plan in regards to your eating? Okay, weekends, going out with friends and tailgating. Social, yeah, we hear that one a lot. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to grab a pen and a piece of paper. Boredom, going out. I'm going to move this a little bit. Late night snacks. Okay. We're going to come back to some of those in a little bit, but I wanted us to go ahead and get a good base for that at the very beginning before we started talking, and then we're going to go back. So keep that handy. So what is eating style? Where's my, there it is. Well, first, our goals for today. We're going to define what an eating style is, why it's important for us to know that, talk about behaviors that support our goals, talk about behaviors that go against our goals, define and figure out what your personal eating style is, and then what do we do with that information, okay? Another person commented, cravings even after you've meal prepped. Okay, thank you guys for sharing. So this is what we're going to try and accomplish today in the next little bit. Feel free anytime that you have questions to put them in the chat box. I'll do my best to get back to them, and if I don't right away, then I will hopefully catch it before we're finished today. Okay, so what an eating style is not. I think it's very important to start this whole conversation with eating style is not good or bad. It just is. So we're going to be talking about very specific patterns of behavior, very specific choices, things like that, that you all have, that everybody has really, that can impact your eating. And to remember that it's not good or bad, it's just facts, it's objective, and we're going to use that information to help us plan how we can best succeed. So remember that as we're talking about this today. So what is an eating style? Does anybody have any guesses on what I mean when I talk about what an eating style is? Doesn't look like anybody's typing, but I'm going to give you guys a few more minutes, or a few more seconds. Okay, how you eat during the day. Yeah. So like exactly what it looks like. That's a great example. Choice of food. Okay. Yep. Okay. So what? You guys mentioned that. What are you eating or drinking? How much are you eating or drinking? Okay. Where? Where are you? Are you at the table, the car? Are you walking? Are you at the computer? Are you sitting on the couch? Schedule of eating. Yes, you're right. Schedule of eating. Kind of mentioned this again. How much? How much are you actually eating? What's the caloric intake? What are portion sizes? And somebody mentioned the next one. When? When are you eating? Are you eating all day? Are you eating one time a day? Are you eating every 3 hours? Is it intentional that you're not eating every 3 hours, or is life and work and time management a struggle? Okay. And then why are you eating? Is it physical hunger, social, and emotional? So it's determined often by our knowledge of food and eating and health. It also can be impacted. Well, let me ask you guys, how do you think our eating style comes about? How do you think we get the style that we have? How you were raised, habits, the way you were raised, habits. Y'all are all on the same page. Family influence, yeah. Yeah, time constraints, there's a little different one in there. Schedules. Yeah, so it can be about our family patterns. It can be how we manage our skills related to food. It can be about how we respond to different cues. Our schedules, our time management, and all of that play a role in how we develop our own eating style. Do you all believe that you can change your eating style? Good. Yes. Yes, you can change it. So how does gathering all this information help us and to learn about our eating style? It helps us because we're able to take the information, gather it like data, and then make adjustments as we need to. And that's what we're going to talk about at the very end. Okay? Yeah, so how does it help me lose weight? I just answered that. So we're going to use it to make sure we are helping you get towards your goal. So goal supporting behavior. Have any of you heard of the 5 P's before? Good. Good. So, no, okay, so this will be new for some of you. Great. So the 5 P's, the first one is going to be planning. So how does planning help you in supporting your goals of weight loss or weight maintenance? Planning helps you buy the food. It's easier to stay on track when you plan your day. Track your eating. You don't have to think about it because you've already made the decision. Helps prevent spontaneous stops. Yeah, those are great. Planning ahead, whether it's what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat, how you're going to eat it, all helps stay with success because of all the reasons you guys have just mentioned, right? So portion controlled. That's the second P we're going to talk about. Portion controlled is definitely going to be a good tip that's going to help you support your goals. Because, and for a couple different reasons. One, I think that having pre-portioned amounts takes kind of the thinking out of it. That's one of the reasons that shakes and meal replacements can be so helpful because it's already packaged for you, okay? Do any of you package or portion control your own items at home? Okay. How do you guys do that? Like, how do you physically do it? Okay, good. You actually use a measuring cup. Great. So there's a couple different ways. Oh, that's a good idea. A smaller plate. It makes the portion look a little bit bigger. Scale measuring cups. Yes. So being sure that we're accurately doing it. There are some tips about eyeballing things, but I truly feel that if we have access to a scale or measuring cup when we're at home, that's going to be a great way to know for sure something's portion controlled. And even better yet, making the decision to portion control it before it's time to eat it. So, for example, maybe like on Sunday night, going ahead and weighing out or portioning your nuts and putting them in snack-sized bags so that it's already done when it's time for a snack. So that way you're not having to make the choice to portion control when you're already hungry. Proportionate. So when proportionate, that's the third P, and that's going to talk about making sure we're getting what we need to fit our goals. So making sure your nutrients are balanced based on your particular plan. And that's when, if this is something you don't quite understand, talking to the dietitian or the medical team is going to be a really good strategy for you to make sure that you are hitting what you need, which is, again, why logging is so important. The proper place. So what do you all think is the proper place to have an eating episode? A table, home, at the table, not in front of the TV. Yeah. Okay. So do all of you eat every eating episode at a table? Somebody does, but there's lots of no's. Yeah, and I even saw a laugh out loud. And the reason we laugh out loud is because our society is not really set up necessarily in our day-to-day life to be able to eat 5 to 6 eating episodes sitting at a table with no distractions, right? But the whole idea is to do that as often as we can, to get away from the computer, to get out of the car, and to plan our day and food choices so that we can have intentional and mindful eating episodes. So yeah, to pull away from the computer desk and go sit in the break room for a little while. Okay, the last one is going to be peaceful. So when you think about this, think about not having all your children screaming at you or not having stressful emails coming in when you're eating. I think this one's kind of hard. Until I started looking at the 5 Ps, I never really thought about making sure my meal was peaceful, right? So when you look at this list, which one do you feel that you were the most successful at? Which P? Portion planning, proportion planning, or yeah, planning, plan and portion. Y'all are on the same wavelengths today in this group. Planning, portion. Okay, so it looks like we need help with the proper place and it being peaceful. I think those are very, very challenging too. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to make a note for us to make sure we go over that at the very, very end, more than maybe the others. So the proper place and peaceful. Don't let me forget, you guys. Okay. So now that we've talked about the goal supporting behavior, we're going to shift gears and talk about the 5 Gs. Okay, those are going to be the behaviors that oppose our goals. So let's look at those. 5 Gs. Grazing. That's exactly what it sounds like. That's when you're not having set eating episodes. It's just constant grazing, going to the kitchen, grabbing a handful, having a snack, then having that back and forth. So there's grabbing and going, and I think this kind of connects back to our lifestyle. The drive-through, fast food, things are quick. And that often results in the 3rd G, which is gulping, and that is eating too fast. Sometimes we're eating and then the American lifestyle, yeah. And then we're eating it, and you don't even remember like taking that last bite. You know, we're not mindful, we're not intentional. And so then gorging, the 4th G, that's when we're going to be overeating. So that's when we're having too many calories. Why do you think people struggle with gorging and eating too many calories? What do you think is one of the biggest reasons? Time management, mindless. Tell me what you mean by time management. They aren't eating often enough, cravings, waiting too long to eat. Hurrying to food prep. Okay. So yeah, these are all really great answers. So part of the reason is we eat too quickly and we don't take time to make sure and check in with our hunger, right? Not eating often enough, somebody mentioned that. So then by the time we get to eat, we're chasing hunger. And when we feel very, very hungry, it's harder to make an on-plan choice or to control the speed in which we eat. Yeah, all right. And then goodies, the fifth G. That's looking at empty calories. Those are your cooler drinks, your sweets, the things that are not going to be filling in with your macronutrients and things that are going to help you stay full and fuel your body appropriately. So of these, which one do you think you, let's say, you don't have trouble with? Which one do you think you have a good grasp on how to avoid? We avoid gulping. Gorging. Grazing. Okay, so what's your most challenging G in this group? We got a mix. At the very end, we're going to be, like I mentioned, talking about tips, and I think that that's going to be a great place for us to address some of these. But if you go ahead and write down the behavior that you struggle with the most, and if you feel like we need some more tips to talk about that when we're at the end, when we talk about questions, then let me know, and we can spend a little bit extra time talking about that G. Okay. So let's go ahead and shift. I want you to get your pen and paper out that you already hopefully have out, but I'll give those of you that may have joined a little bit later a little bit of extra time. So this process next is going to be an assessment style or an assessment to figure out your eating style. I want you to not overthink the answers. I want you to just jot them down. You do not have to share them unless you desire to. So sharing your numbers and answers at the end of this assessment is going to be completely voluntary. So I want you to be most honest with yourself when we write this stuff down, okay? And if you do want to go over it, just not in the group, you can bring it to the next behavior session that you have to process. So hopefully everyone has a pen and a sheet of paper. So for section 1, I want you to write at the top of your paper section 1 because we're going to have a couple different sections. And then I'm going to read these out loud, but it's also going to be posted on your screen too. And you're going to score them based on this criteria. 1, this statement does not describe me at all. 2, it describes me a little bit. 3, fairly well. And 4, your picture should be beside that statement. Okay, that's what I want a 4 to look like to you guys. So we'll go ahead and get started with section 1, and there's going to be 5 spots for this. Okay, I overeat when I'm feeling stressed or anxious. So go ahead and give the feeling stressed or anxious a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I think it's important to note we're not necessarily putting these in order. So you could have all 1s, all 2s, all 3s, or all 4s. Okay? Does anybody have any questions before I move on about how we're completing the assessment? No. Okay. If you do, just tap it in. I'm feeling angry. So I overeat when I'm feeling angry. Go ahead and give that a score. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling bored. Or when I'm feeling happy or celebrating. So I'll leave this up for a little bit longer. So just overeat when, and then read the 5 statements and give them a score. So when you're done with that, I want you to take those 5 numbers, add them up, and give yourself a total for section 1. If y'all are ready to move on, if some of you could just type move on in the box or something to let me know, we can go ahead. Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks. Section 2, same thing. The same scoring is going to be here. Not at all, a little, fairly well, or exactly. When eating with others, I'm the first to finish my meal. I tend to nibble when preparing or cleaning up after a meal. I regularly have second helpings of foods that I enjoy. I eat in places, sorry, there's a typo, other than the kitchen or the dining room or the break room at work would be another example. I tend to clean my entire plate even when I'm full. Excuse the typos in this, you guys. Okay, so answer those 5 based on the rating scores. And then again, total section 2 up. And go ahead and give me a ready when you guys are finishing up. Y'all are fast. Okay. Section 3. It's going to be again the same scoring. I tend to overeat when I'm with certain people. Many of my friends or family members like to eat. I attend a lot of social events at which food is served. So this could, when I say social, this could even be like work, right? If there's tons of food at your workplace and lots of triggers there, it doesn't necessarily have to be something you're doing necessarily just with your friends outside of work. My work requires that I eat many meals away from home, so traveling, things like that. At a social event, I have a hard time controlling my eating. So these are the 5 that we're going to look for right now. And go ahead and score. So then I want to make sure you have your section 1, 2, and 3 score ready. So first we're going to look at section 1. So if you couldn't guess, section 1 is looking at eating behaviors tied to emotions. So you take your total score and see where you fit. You do not have to comment here, okay? But if you would like to share, you're welcome to. 5 through 9 means emotional eating is likely not a barrier. 10 to 15 means emotions are sometimes a trigger for overeating. And 16 to 20, your choices are frequently guided by your emotions. So I think it's important to note, so a lot of y'all are following in that sometimes mark, that even no matter where you fell with a total score, if you go back to any individual question and if you got a 3, that's still something worth looking at, right? So let's say that I tend to overeat when I'm with certain people. So maybe that whole section was a 9, but one of them was a 3, okay? So that could potentially be another way for you to look to see if there's some areas that may be specifically a struggle. We'll talk about tips at the end, so we're going to go on and go to section 2. Section 2 was really focused on just eating behavior skills and habits, some of which that we talked about could come from childhood, learned behavior, different things like that. So 5 to 9, it's not a problem. 10 to 15, they could hinder you. 16 to 20, they're likely impacting your weight loss. Yeah. Remember somebody that just commented 16 to 20 and then put a sad face and then a beside of it. Remember what we said in the beginning, okay? I'm going to challenge you guys. An eating style is not good or bad. We can use this information, this data that you have figured out by assessing yourself, and we're going to be able to put specific skills in place to help you. So, for those of you that may have put something extra beside of it, I want you to really kind of step back and take a deep breath and know this is just data and we're going to work on finding specific strategies, okay? Eating style is not good or bad, it just is. Okay, section 3. This looks at social influences, and I guess the several of you may be a little higher on here based on some of your answers in the beginning. Yep. 10 to 15, 16 to 20, 5 to 9. So now that you have your different styles, so section 3 was social, section 2 was skills and habits, and section 1 was emotional. I want you to go back to what I asked you to write down at the very, very beginning of the whole class, and that was to identify one area that you struggle with most. Are y'all finding when you do that that they match up with what your highest score was with what you identified? Or are you finding that it doesn't? Somebody, yep, there's somebody, they're matching up. The reason I ask this is because I want you to realize that you absolutely know you the best, right? So this tells me that right now this particular group, for the most part, has some really good insight to where you possibly have the most challenging area or the thing that trips you up, the biggest barriers. So now that you know that, now that we have that data and it's confirmed based on what I asked you originally, now we're going to figure out what to do. So this is a really good time too that if you are somebody that feel like you really succeed in a particular area that somebody else in the group may be struggling with, as we talk about tips, go ahead and add some. Share your tips. Y'all know, y'all are in the trenches and figuring this out and have practical tips that really work well. So that's one of the reasons I love groups so much, because y'all can share together. So use that chat box for any tips too as we kind of wrap up and shift gears to that focus. Does anybody have any comments or questions about the specific eating style assessment or your particular style? Doesn't look like it, so we'll go ahead and move on. So what now? What do we do now that we have the information we have? So if you look on here, it correlates the emotions to section 1, skills and habits to section 2, and social to section 3. And being able to, for the emotional, we'll start with the emotional component. So if you're somebody that scored higher in the emotional area or had one of your questions at 3 or above in scoring, then these are some tips. We want to increase awareness with emotional check-ins. So what are emotional check-ins? Who can tell me? I'm going to hold out on you guys for this one. Can somebody tell me what? There's somebody typing. How you feel when you're eating before and after. So that's definitely an emotion. So the emotional check-in is the act of checking into that emotion. Does that make sense? So like that's like a planned, intentional kind of, I think stopping before I decide to eat, am I hungry or sad or bored? Perfect. And I even challenge you to not only do it before you eat, but do it like throughout the day. So have like you can even set a clock. You can set a clock and let that timer go off and just kind of say, okay, how am I feeling right now? And it doesn't mean you have to fix it. It doesn't mean you have to change it. It just means that you're bringing it into your awareness and accepting it about being present. And when we do that, it helps us to be able to acknowledge and then understand if we're struggling with a food choice. We can think back and go, oh, wait, I was really stressed about 30 minutes ago trying to get that deadline completed. Am I really physically hungry? Okay. The second is to identify non-food strategies to manage emotion. So what are some of the things you all do, especially those of you that may be scored low in this area on the assessment? What are some of the things you do to help manage your emotions, make you feel good, that have nothing to do with food? What are y'all's tips? Shopping. But that, you're right, that does bring on a whole other issue. Yeah, it does. Okay. Writing in a journal, gardening. Why do you think when you say it can bring on a whole other issue with shopping, what are your thoughts about that? Anybody? Right. Yes, that's exactly it. So we want to caution that although it is okay to shop, we all shop, right? We want to caution on being able to transfer one thing to the other, which is exactly, yeah, to overspend, things like that. So I think it's so important to continue to have open conversations with your behaviorists and your family, your support system, whoever that may be, about other ways that you manage your emotions. You can even ask your close friends, what do you do for you? Which kind of takes us into the third piece. Implement regular self-care and identify strategies. So I don't want you to just manage your emotions when you're in a stressful situation. Okay? What I want you to do is take time every single day to take care of you, to check into your emotions and do things that make you feel good, maybe even feel a little indulgent sometimes. And that can be what? What are some examples of that? Anybody have good ones? I'm waiting on somebody. Say it again. Okay. So what's something that you can do that's not talk with your granddaughter? There. Okay, I'll say it again and then we'll kind of go into it. What's something you can do that feels good to you emotionally, that makes you happy, that brings you joy? For lack of a better term, that saying that fills your cup, you know? Somebody said, talk with my granddaughter, exercise. Yeah, so these are things, get a massage, be outside, walk. These are great. It's going to look different for everybody, and that's what I think is super, super important. You may be looking at some of the things people are listing going, oh my goodness, that does not feel good to me. I have no desire to do that, and that's okay. You've got to figure out what's going to work for you and go from there. And I don't want you to do this just when you're stressed out or when you're thinking about eating. I want you to implement and plan for those things on a regular basis so that we can kind of decrease the amount of stress and triggers that we may have that may lead to emotional eating. Okay, does anybody have any final tips about the emotional component of this before we move to the skill and the habits? Okay, so the next section is going to address that section too, but I think it's a good refresher for everybody. So skills and habits. These are things that we can do to just break the cycle of what we're used to doing, what we've learned to do, what we've been forced to do. I like to share the stories like a prime example. My husband, when he was in elementary school, their recess time was right after lunch. And they had like a set amount of time for both of those. And so they were forced, not forced, but to get the most out of their recess, they chose to eat really, really fast so they could get done and go to the playground. So that habit of eating fast for not the purpose of eating fast, but the purpose of getting to go play longer, really kind of instilled this eating fast habit for him. So that's an example, right? So one of the things we can do is challenge those behaviors that we talked about, those habits that are not helping us get to our goal. So forcing yourself to eat slowly, putting your fork down between bites. That's something, next time you eat something or drink something, think about how many times you set your fork down. Most of the time we're mindless and we're kind of, even if we're not like shoveling fast, we're not necessarily setting our fork down. That in itself is going to slow you down. Making sure you sit down to eat. Another one that I really, really like is putting leftovers away before sitting down to your meal, because that takes the environmental trigger, the fact that the food's still out. In order to get seconds, you would have to go to the fridge, pull it out, maybe warm it up, instead of just reaching over and grabbing another spoon. It makes it a little bit harder to overeat. Not that it's not possible, but there's extra steps in place. And not only that, but if you decide that you're going to use leftovers for some of your lunches or later down the road, you can go ahead and pre-portion them into containers so that way you have it and then stick that in the fridge. Measuring food, you all talked a lot about that with using the scale and the measuring cups, and I think those are great tips. And then eating from a plate. And somebody mentioned a smaller plate, which I think is great. That's a really great idea because it makes the food look larger on your plate and kind of tricks our brain. But also just eating from a plate in general. There are so many times where things come in bags or boxes or this and they're not pre-portioned. And if we take that with us, we're more than likely going to eat a larger portion than what we intended. So making sure you're intentional about that. There's a lot of other skills and habits, but my guess is those are going to be some pretty basic tips to help everybody. Does anybody have any other ones that they'd like to share? Okay. Oh, somebody's typing. We'll hold on for a second. Maybe not anymore. I'll come back if they do. So section 3 is social. So these are for those of you that scored a little bit higher in the social section. Somebody commented, so pause. Let's get back to section 2. Only prepare what I'm going to eat. So that helps with controlling, and that could be a technique for some people. Yeah, that's an idea. Okay. So social, we'll go to social, then we'll come back. So bringing food with you to a social event, bringing something that you know that you're able to partake in, to have. Offering to help out with the menu planning, maybe if you're part of a social event. Another strategy that I really recommend is, this is the perfect time, every day is, but specifically when you have a special event, to make sure you're not skipping your meals. Because if you skip an eating episode, that can lead to, that restriction of the calories can lead to being overly hungry, and then you're back to chasing hunger and can overeat or binge eat very much easier than otherwise. So making sure that you don't save or bank your calories, making sure that you're eating every 3 hours, because in that 24-hour period, you're likely going to end up being less with your calories if you continue to eat at your regular frequency. Have go-to restaurant choices with planned meal options. So this is a thing you can do preventatively, right? So look at 3 restaurants, whether it's online, on MyFitnessPal, you talk with the dietitian, and pick 3 places, each one having an item that you could get there that falls within your plan. That way, let's say you're at work or with friends and they make the suggestion to go eat. Well, at times it's okay to say no thank you, but we also want to continue to socialize with people. So then by saying, sure, let's go eat. Do you want to go to A, B, or C? And then they get to choose, or you get to choose, and you already know what you're going to have before the opportunity even comes up. So there's no question. You don't have to look at the menu. You can just kind of jump right in and know at Chick-fil-A, this is what I get. At such and such, this is what I get. And the dietitians are really good about, if you bring in a menu or something, they can help you kind of decipher what falls within your plan. And then kind of contrary to that, but in addition to that, I would say, is start new non-food related social traditions with friends and family. So much of what we do is completely surrounded by food, and sometimes that's not avoidable, or we can't avoid it, right? So, but when we can, we need to make an effort to do so. So before Thanksgiving, make sure you tell everybody, maybe after Thanksgiving we're going to play flag football. People will likely not eat as much because they're going to want to win at flag football. Or have a game night that's not necessarily related around food. So think about what you and your family or friends would like to do and do that. Meet your friends at a park instead of at a restaurant. So those are some things that can really help socially too. I want to go back to this one last comment that somebody made. When going out to eat, share my meal or intentional of taking half of what I have home for lunch the next day. That's really, really good. One of my tips about taking half home is being able to, when you order your food, go ahead and ask your server, can you go ahead and bring the to-go box out when my meal comes? Because I don't know about you guys, but when we say we're going to eat half and we cut it in half and split it to the plate, it can be challenging not to continue eating when other people are eating, right? So, but if you go ahead before you even start eating, kind of like the thing we talked about at home with putting leftovers away, you can go ahead and put half of it in a box and set it in the booth beside you or something, and then you only have half on your plate. That's a great one. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, any other tips for the social component? Okay, start thinking of any last questions you guys have. I wanted to go back to the P's that y'all were talking about, that you all feel like were the most challenging to you. You talked about proper place and peaceful being two of the P's that are the hardest. So as far as proper place goes, those of you that often ate at the table, what are your tips? How do you make sure that that happens? You guys may not be out there still. Make it family time. Okay. So make it like a family rule. We're going to have this meal at the table. Yeah. I think, too, it's also about boundaries, which we could have like a whole another hour class on boundaries, right? But it's about being able to say, all right, work computer, I'm going to shut you off for a little bit. I'm going to head to the table outside, and I'm going to eat. Somebody said no TV, no devices, and somebody lives alone, so it's a huge challenge for me not to sit on the sofa. Yes, that is so challenging. And eating at the table is very difficult with drinking shakes. Yeah, especially when other people are eating. Yeah. Okay, so maybe let's shift it. Proper place, yes, it's at the table. But I think what we're trying to get, the goal at the end of the day when we talk about proper place is no distractions and intentional. So even if that means going outside, not sitting at a table, but sitting on like a bench or something and drinking a shake. Or maybe going and sitting on your porch without distraction of the phone or whatever and having your shake. That may be a good compromise other than just sitting at the table. So what the table represents is I'm making an intentional commitment to eat my meal. making an intentional commitment to be present right here. But when we're on the couch or we're in the car, we're typically doing, not always, right, but typically doing those 5 Gs. We're eating too fast, it's grab and go, it's all of that. So yeah. But it can be really, really hard with shakes, especially when there's other people in front of the TV or computer, which I'm guilty. Yes, it is extremely, extremely difficult, especially at the computer. So setting alarm clocks to make sure that you get up for your eating episodes can be really, really helpful. The last one is peaceful. In a perfect world, I would love for you to eat every meal sitting quietly and calmly without stress, but that's not going to happen, right? So what I want you to focus on is checking in with your emotions before you eat, taking some good, really, really deep breaths if you're having a negative emotion or emotional reaction to something, and taking a minute to just be present with yourself, have your shake, and move on about your day, or have your snack or your meal or whatever it is that you're having. And that way, the whole peaceful idea is that you're not making choices out of that emotion. It's back to being intentional and mindful. That's all that I really had to cover for today. I'm going to keep it open for just a few minutes. Thank you guys for letting our counseling interns hang out with us in here. You'll see them again, and they'll be with us until May. So type any questions that you have. If not, we'll be closing the class down soon, and you'll be sent to a link that you can fill out the survey. And then from anybody that fills out that survey completely, then you'll have a Perka point waiting for you at the nutrition shop. If you don't know what Perka points are, they're awesome, and they can get you some discount off products and training and other things like that you can pick up at the nutrition shop. Thank you guys for your participation. Today was great. And if there's something that kind of struck a chord with you and you want to have more conversation about it, feel free to email me or touch base with your behaviorist at your next appointment. All right, y'all have a great week, okay?